When my children stopped sitting with me at dinner, I knew something had changed. No one said anything. No one shouted. No one told me I was no longer needed. But I could feel it. It was in the way their phones stayed in their hands. It was in the way conversations ended when I entered the room. It was in the silence that followed my simple questions. Did you eat well today? Yes, Ma. Just that. One line. No story.
No laughter.
No details. I remember the evening. I understood it clearly. The rain was falling outside. Soft at first, then heavier. I was sitting near the window, folding old clothes that no longer fit anyone. I heard my son laughing in the next room. He was talking to someone on the phone. His voice sounded young again. Alive. Excited. The way it used to sound when he ran to me after school. I smiled. And then I realized he had not spoken to me that way in years. That night, I ate alone. Not because they told me to, but because no one called me to the table. And I did not want to disturb anyone. When parents grow old, we do not suddenly become unloved. We slowly become invisible. And invisibility hurts more than anger ever could. I was not always this quiet woman sitting by the window. There was a time when this house was my world. Every wall carried my voice. Every room carried my footsteps. This house was small when we first moved in. The paint was uneven. The kitchen tiles were cracked. The roof leaked during heavy rain. But it was ours. My husband and I worked very hard to build it. Head drove a bus for almost 30 years. I stitched clothes at home, sometimes late into the night. My fingers would ache, but I never complained. We had 2 children, a son and a daughter. My son was the serious one, always thinking, always planning. My daughter was soft-hearted. She used to sit beside me while I cooked and ask endless questions. Ma, why do onions make us cry? Ma, when I grow up, will you still cook for me? I would laugh. Of course I will. Back then, love was loud in our house. Birthdays were simple but full of noise. Festivals meant cooking together. Exams meant late-night tea and whispered prayers. I knew their fears. I knew their friends. I knew when they were pretending to be brave. When my husband passed away, everything changed. It was sudden. A heart attack. One evening he was sitting with us. The next morning he was gone. I did not cry loudly. I did not break things. I just sat on the floor and looked at the door. I kept thinking he would walk in again. But he never did. After that, I became both mother and father. I learned how to fix small repairs.
Y handled bank papers.
I stood in long lines for school fees. I sold my gold bangles to pay for my son's college admission. I never told him that. I did not want him to feel guilty. Years passed. My son got a good job in the city. My daughter got married and moved far away. The house became quieter.
But I told myself this is life.
Children grow. They leave. That is not abandonment. That is success. When my son asked me to move in with him after his marriage, I felt proud. Ma, you should not live alone, he said. We have space. Come stay with us. His wife smiled politely. Yes, Ma. It will be nice. I packed my clothes carefully. I folded my husband's old sweater and kept it at the bottom of the suitcase. I thought I was going to a new chapter. I did not know I was entering a slow goodbye at first. Everything felt normal. My daughter-in-law was respectful. She made tea in the mornings. My son would ask, "Did you sleep well, Ma?" I would say yes, even if I did not. The new house was bigger. Modern. Bright lights. Clean floors. But it did not smell like home. It smelled like fresh paint and new furniture. I tried to adjust. I folded laundry. I washed vegetables. I kept my things in one small cupboard. I told myself not to interfere. Times are different now. Young people live differently. I should not expect old ways. But slowly, I began to notice small things. One day, I rearranged the kitchen shelves. Not much. Just placed spices where I could reach them easily. In the evening, I heard my daughter-in-law whisper to my son. She changes things without asking. Her voice was not angry, just tired. My son replied softly, "She doesn't mean anything. She's used to her way." Used to her way. That sentence stayed in my heart.
Was I a problem now?
Another time, I told my grandson a story before bed. The same story I once told his father. The next morning, my daughter-in-law said gently, "Ma, he sleeps better with cartoons. Stories make him ask too many questions." I nodded. I understand. After that, I stopped telling stories. I would sit near the door and listen to the television sounds instead. I noticed that when guests came, I was introduced with respect. "This is my mother." People would smile. "Namaste, Auntie." They would ask about my health. But after 5 minutes, conversations moved on. Work, trips, investments, school admission, things I did not understand fully. I would sit quietly, holding my tea, waiting for someone to include me. No one did it on purpose. But no one noticed either. One evening, I tried to share an old memory about my husband. My son interrupted gently. "Yes, Ma, you've told us that before." I had. Many times. Because memories are all I have now. But I swallowed the rest of the story. And after that, I began telling my stories only inside my own head. I began waking up earlier than everyone. It was peaceful in the early morning. I would make tea for myself, stand by the balcony, watch people go to work. I wondered when I stopped being part of the world outside. Sometimes I thought about moving back to my old house. But it was rented out now. And even if I could go back, what would I go back to? Empty walls, silent rooms. At least here, I could hear voices. Even if they were not meant for me.
The
real change happened slowly, like a shadow growing longer each day. My son became busier at work. My daughter-in-law managed the house her own way. They did not ask for my advice anymore. They did not need it. And that is when I realized something painful. Parents spend their whole life preparing their children to live without them. And when that day comes, we are surprised by how well they succeed. There is a special kind of loneliness that lives inside a full house. It does not make noise. It does not ask for attention. It simply sits beside you quietly. I began to notice that I was planning my day around everyone else's absence. When they left for work and school, I felt lighter. Not because I did not love them, but because I did not feel like I was in the way. I cleaned slowly. I folded clothes carefully. Sometimes I would cook one dish from the old days. Not to change their habits, just to remind myself that I still knew how to create something warm. One afternoon, I made my son's favorite lentil curry, the same one he used to request during exam season. When they came home, I waited. He took one bite. "It's nice, Ma," he said. Then he added salt. My daughter-in-law said gently, "We usually make it less thick." I smiled. Of course. The next week, she cooked it her way. No one asked for mine again.
It was a small thing.
But small things build quiet walls. Sometimes I would sit with my grandson while he played. He liked fast games on a bright screen. I did not understand them, but I watched. "Dottie, you don't know this level," he would say. I laughed softly. "You are right. I don't." Children grow in a world we cannot enter. And that is natural. But what hurt was not that I could not enter his world. It was that no one entered mine anymore. Even conversations between my son and his wife began to include a soft sigh when my name came up. "She gets bored," my daughter-in-law once said. "We should maybe look at some activity center for seniors." Activity center.
I knew what that meant.
A polite place. With other old people. Television in the corner. Plastic chairs. I nodded when my son mentioned it to me. "It might be nice, Ma. You can meet friends." Friends. At this age, we do not look for new friends. We look for familiar voices.
Familiar footsteps.
But I did not argue. I have never been good at arguing. I have always chosen peace over pride. The day that changed everything was not dramatic. There was no shouting. No door slamming. Just a sentence. Simple.
Soft.
Heavy. It was a Sunday. Rainy again. I was in the living room, folding old newspapers to keep under wet shoes. My son and daughter-in-law were speaking in the kitchen. Their voices were low. But in a quiet house, low voices travel. We need space, she said. It's becoming difficult. I know, my son replied. A pause. Then the sentence that made my hands stop moving. Maybe it's time to consider a senior home. Senior home. The words did not feel real. I waited for him to disagree strongly. To say no. To say, she is my mother. But his answer was slow. Maybe just to see options. Options. I sat there for a long time. The rain outside became louder. My chest felt empty. Not broken. Just empty. Later that evening, he came to sit beside me. Ma, he began carefully. I looked at his face. He looked tired. Not cruel. Not unkind. Just tired. There are some very good senior living places now.
Clean.
Safe. With doctors. I nodded slowly. I see. It would not mean we don't care, he said quickly. I smiled. I know. And I meant it. Because I do know. They are not bad people. They are busy. They are stressed. They are building their own lives. And I am from a different chapter. He continued, you would have people your age to talk to. I wanted to ask, but who will I call when I cannot sleep? Instead, I said, if you think it is best.
He looked relieved.
Relief, that is when I understood. My staying had become a responsibility, not a joy. And love should never feel like a burden. That night, I opened my old suitcase. The same one I brought when I first moved here. I folded my clothes carefully. Again. The same husband's sweater at the bottom. Again. I moved slowly. Not because I was weak, but because every fold felt like closing a memory. My grandson came to the door. Dottie, are you going somewhere? Yes, I said softly.
For a little while.
Will you come back? I smiled. We will see. Children accept change faster than adults. He nodded and ran back to his game. I sat on the bed after he left. And for the first time in many years, I allowed myself to cry. Not loudly. Just enough for my pillow to understand. The senior home was clean. Bright walls. Neat beds. A small garden with trimmed plants. Other elderly people sat in chairs, watching birds. Some were quiet.
Some were talking to themselves.
The nurse smiled kindly. Welcome. My son carried my bag inside. He looked uncomfortable. I did not want him to feel guilt. So I said, it's very nice here. He nodded.
Yes.
It is. Before leaving, he touched my feet, like he used to when he was young. Take care, Ma. You too, I said. He left quickly. I watched from the window. He did not look back. And that is okay. Looking back makes leaving harder. The first night there, I did not sleep much. New bed. New ceiling. New sounds. Someone coughing in another room. A nurse walking down the hallway. I held my husband's sweater close. And I asked myself a quiet question. When did love become something we schedule? Something we visit on Sundays? Something we send through phone calls instead of sitting beside each other? But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. I began to notice others. An old woman named Kamla, who hummed songs every evening. A man who waited near the gate every afternoon, even though no one came. We all carried the same invisible suitcase, filled with memories, filled with love that had nowhere to go. One morning, Kamla sat beside me. First time here? She asked. Yes. She nodded. They always say it is temporary. I smiled gently. I think everything in life is temporary. She looked at me for a long time. Then she laughed softly. You are stronger than you look. Maybe I was. Or maybe I had simply accepted something that others were still fighting. Acceptance is not weakness. It is a quiet kind of courage. I began helping in small ways. Folding napkins in the dining hall. Watering plants. Listening to stories that were repeated many times. I realized something important. Old people do not repeat stories because they forget. We repeat them because those are the moments when we felt most alive. And we want to visit them again. Even if only through words. One afternoon, my son called. Ma, how are you? I am fine. Are they treating you well? Yes. He hesitated. We will visit soon. I said, take your time. And I meant that too. Because I had started learning how to sit with myself. Without feeling unwanted. Without feeling in the way. Sometimes, love changes its shape. It becomes quieter. Less visible. But somewhere inside, it still exists. And maybe that is enough. The days at the senior home began to follow a quiet pattern. Morning tea. Soft sunlight in the garden. Lunch at noon. Evening prayers in the small hall. At first, I counted the days. Then I stopped counting. There is a strange peace that comes when you stop waiting for the door to open. I began to listen more. Not just to others, but to myself. For many years, my identity was simple. I was someone's wife. Someone's mother. Someone's support. But here I was just me. It felt unfamiliar. But not empty. One afternoon, I sat beside the old man who waited near the gate every day. Are you expecting someone? I asked gently. He smiled without looking at me. Hope is a habit, he said. That sentence stayed with me. Hope is a habit. So is disappointment. So is forgiveness. We choose which one we practice. I started writing letters. Not to send, just to write. Letters to my husband. Letters to my younger self. Letters to my son. In one letter I wrote, you did not fail me. Life simply moved faster than our hearts could follow. When I finished writing that, I felt lighter. Sometimes pain does not need a solution. It only needs understanding. One evening, the nurse came to me. There is a call for you. It was my grandson. His voice sounded smaller than before. Daddy. Yes, Beta. When are you coming home? Home. The word touched something deep inside me. I am okay here, I said softly. I don't like it without you, he replied. Children speak truth without fear.
Why?
I asked. Because no one tells stories at night. My heart moved. I did not cry. I did not let my voice shake. I can tell you stories on the phone. It's not the same. There was silence on the line. Then he whispered, Papa looks sad. That sentence surprised me. After we ended the call, I sat quietly for a long time. Maybe I was not the only one learning a lesson. 2 days later, my son came. Not on a Sunday. Not as a scheduled visit. He walked into the garden where I was watering plants. He looked thinner. Tired. But different. Ma, he said softly. I smiled. You came. He nodded. We sat on a wooden bench. For a few minutes we said nothing. Then he spoke. The house feels empty. I did not answer. He continued. I thought I was solving a problem. I did not realize I was creating another one. I looked at his face carefully. There was no pride there. Only honesty. I did not want to be a burden, I said gently. You never were, he replied quickly. But then he lowered his eyes. I just did not know how to balance everything. And in that moment, I saw something clearly. Parents grow old. Children grow stressed. And somewhere between responsibility and exhaustion, love becomes quiet.
Not gone.
Just quiet. I forgive you, I said. He looked up.
Surprised.
I did not ask. I know, I said with a small smile. But forgiveness should not wait for requests. He took my hand. His hands were still warm, still familiar. Come home, he whispered. I did not answer immediately. I looked around. At Kamla humming near the flowers. At the old man near the gate. At the life I had begun building again. I will visit, I said slowly. But this is also my home now. He nodded, understanding something bigger than comfort. Things changed slowly after that. I did not move back immediately. Instead, we created something new. I visited every weekend. Sometimes they visited me during the week. Not out of duty.
But because they wanted to.
My grandson started bringing his school books. Tell me a story after this, he would say. And I did. My daughter-in-law began sitting beside me in the kitchen again. Not to correct. Not to sigh. Just to sit. One afternoon, she said quietly, I did not understand how lonely it feels. I looked at her and smiled. Now you do. There was no blame in my heart. Only clarity. Love must be expressed. Otherwise, it slowly turns into assumption. And assumptions build distance. Now, when I sit in the garden of a senior home, I do not feel abandoned, I feel aware. Aware that life moves in seasons. There is a season when parents hold their children's hands, and a season when children hold their parents' medicines. And sometimes, there is a season when everyone is too tired to hold anything properly. That is when patience becomes the most important form of love. When parents grow old, we do not need grand gestures. We need small presence. 5 extra minutes at the table. One real conversation without a phone in hand. A question asked with genuine interest. Are you feeling okay today? That is enough. Love does not disappear with age, but attention often does. And attention is the language of love. I have learned something important. Growing old is not the hardest part. Feeling unseen is. So if you are listening to my story tonight, and your parents are in the next room, go sit with them. Not because they are weak, not because they are lonely, but because one day, silence may sit in their place. And you will wish for one more ordinary conversation. I still keep my husband's sweater in my cupboard. I still wake up early. I still tell stories. The difference is, I no longer wait to be invited. I exist fully, even in quiet spaces. Because love may become a rare visitor when parents grow old. But dignity must always stay at home. Do not wait for regret to teach you tenderness.
Visit while you can.
Listen while you can. Sit beside them while you can. Because one day, the chair across the table may remain empty. And love will wish it had knocked more often.